Jesse Watkins, hailing from a small town in California, transformed his life through perseverance and self-discovery. Despite early educational challenges that included undiagnosed autism and ADHD, he raised a family while working for a construction company before pursuing a huge career change. Opting for a non-traditional path, Jesse became an educator at a Waldorf-inspired public charter school where he fosters creativity and support for his students. Through this journey, he overcame self-doubt and found alignment with his values, inspiring others with his story of personal growth. Today, Jesse epitomizes the power of belief in oneself to achieve dreams and overcome obstacles. So there we have it. Can you talk about what it is that you do, Jesse?
Well, I can tell you I'm more proud of myself now after hearing that. Thank you.
I like to read those right on the air before people have heard them before. So
It's a good move. I like it. Well, I am currently an 8th grade teacher at a Waldorf-inspired public charter. And our education system is a little bit different in that we typically go with our classes from year to year. And in our school, we tend to have an upper grades and lower grades loop. So I've picked up my class in 6th grade, and this is the 3rd year that I have them, and I will be graduating them this year at the end of May.
Now, I've known you for a while, and the wonderful thing about you is how passionate you are about the prep that you do and the way that you are working with these young people and just how excited you are to do what you do. Can you explain the difference between regular and Waldorf Academy school, like regular public school and Waldorf Academy?
Waldorf, well, it was something that I was not familiar with before I fell into it. It was kind of one of those universal things that pushed me in a direction I did not know I was going. So I was at the time pursuing my teaching credential, and I was home, and my wife was tired of me being home because I'm a very extroverted person, and I was wearing her out when she got home from work. So she said, they're looking for a basketball coach down the road. And I had experience with that with my own boys. So I went down there and got a basketball job. And then I was like, I don't know what this Waldorf thing is. But I had my substitute credential. So they said, yeah, come join us and sub here and see what it's all about. And they told me, they're going to make you throw away your TV, the people that had heard of Waldorf. And so I was very foreign to it. I'm a very technological person. I was a technician in the Navy, been a technician most of my life. And it's considered a little bit more hippie of an education from the outside perspective. It's a little gentle. But Waldorf, it's been around for 100 years, started in Germany. And it focuses on more the entire being of the student rather than just the academics. So a big part of what we do is focusing on the virtues that we want to see in children as they're moving through and moving on to their next steps. And we do that through direct instruction and also a lot of other methods. We focus heavily on art and music, gardening, outdoor play, cooperative things, and building the relationships. That's probably my favorite part of Waldorf education, is getting to go with a group of students from year to year allows you to build so much stronger bonds with not only the student, but with their families. They get to know each other, and you get to know more of their background, what's going on at home, their siblings, their parents. And it gives you a better understanding of where the child's coming from. And quite frankly, it allows you to have a little bit more empathy a lot of times when you can see where the behavior is stemming from, because you know more of what's going on in their personal life. And you build that strong relationship that goes even beyond the school. I still keep in touch with former students, and we can do things outside of school, like we've hosted like Halloween parties for my class. So it's a very tight-knit community, and it focuses on building the whole person, not just academics.
I recall that you have also taught yoga and mindfulness and meditation and that sort of thing to the students, which is certainly a far cry from anything that I ever had in my grammar school.
Right. I mean, I never had anything like that either, for sure. That's probably my other favorite part of it, is that I have a lot of freedom in how I approach teaching things. I basically have to justify it to my administrators of what's my reasoning behind why I want to do things. And then as long as they find my reasoning sound, I can basically bring in a lot of non-traditional things into the school. So my personal philosophy is that the better a student is doing emotionally with their mental health, the better they're feeling about themselves, even physically, the easier school becomes. I know when I'm not doing well, the dishes looks like an insurmountable task and I don't want to do it. Same with homework. When a student is struggling, when they're having a hard time, homework seems impossible and it starts getting out of control and starts getting overwhelming. So I was always looking for ways to help the students learn how to take care of themselves and get their well-being in a good place. And then I think that most of the time when a student is feeling good about themselves and things are going well, their educational things become so much easier. I can see it, a direct correlation to assignment completion, quality of work, attitude in class, engagement. And when those things are dropping off, that's when I end up talking to the students and find out there's something going on. So yeah, I've brought them yoga, I've brought them breath work, meditation. My wife is also a therapist. And so I've asked her to give me some resources. So I've brought in just some basic mental health lessons for them so that they're more aware of what's going on and better able to regulate themselves and put into practice some good tools, to help them manage those wild teenage emotions and hormones that we all remember. This is why most adults, when asked, would never go back to middle school.
Now, I don't know a single one that would. Now, with that in mind, it's a lot of differences in the younger generation that, as you get older, you have various different ideas about. What are you noticing right now about the young people? What's your impression of them? How are they different? How are they the same?
They're definitely the same. Kids are kids, but I can see a generational shift. And especially in our community, I think we're a more sensitive community and a little bit more tuned into some of those things. Um, but I see, in fact, we do exercises quite a bit where we examine things from the past and compare them to modern times. In fact, I did a film study course and we watched Karate Kid. And I had ulterior motives. I wanted them to see the moral lessons of the story and how Mr. Miyagi was trying to help Daniel-san, even though he couldn't see it initially, and kind of hoping they would get the correlation of, this is why I'm here, to try and help you and build you. And you might not like some of the things that we do here, but there's a purpose behind them because I'm trying to prepare them for life. And part of the exercise was I asked them to observe things that wouldn't fly in our modern day. And they were on it like a hawk. They were like, oh, Mr. Miyagi gave Daniel-san alcohol. He let him drive a vehicle with no license. He beat up a bunch of teenagers. And they were going shirts and skins in PE class. These things don't happen anymore, or don't happen as frequently anymore. So, they're definitely more sensitive, and they're kind of shocked at those things. They're like, Mr. Miyagi gave him alcohol. And they were like, that's wild. That's so like inconceivable now. And
Mm.
thinking back to my childhood and how many adults were trying to give me alcohol in elementary school on a regular basis because that was just the culture at that time. I had one of my students, as we read The Outsiders, he said, Ponyboy Curtis has terrible self talk because he constantly talks about how he's bad in school and how he's dumb and not good enough. And I thought, that is brilliant. I don't know if anybody's made that observation before reading The Outsiders, but we had talked about self talk and how that can affect us. And he recognized that in this fictional character. And he's like, oh man, I wish he knew better. Like I wish he would not do that to himself.
Mm. Geez, yeah, I was fist fighting and smoking cigarettes in the 5th grade. A few things have changed.
Things have definitely changed. Yeah, they're a more sensitive generation, I think, and they're more aware. They have a lot more information than we've ever had. So that makes a big difference. A lot of them are passionate about issues and have strong opinions, and they're very focused on human rights and living conditions and working conditions and how people are being treated. Uh, we definitely are a very supportive community. We do tend to get a lot of children who are having trouble fitting in a traditional environment and bigger environments. And our community is very accepting and very willing to bring these people in and make a home for them.
That's really quite a beautiful thing. I honestly wish that when I was young that I had been taken into a different kind of school, because public school just simply did not work. And I don't think that it worked for you either, for a lot of the same reasons. It sounds like this is one of the things that you really love about this model, is because it's so focused on the wellness of the individual.
Right, right. I think back to my school times and I look at these times now, and I was so focused on brand name clothing and my image
Right, yeah.
because I was getting bullied for those things on a regular basis. If I came in with the wrong shoes because we were, below the poverty line and struggling, I caught a lot of flack from it. And it was really damaging to me, to the point where I'm 45 and I hate using a coupon because it makes me feel like I don't have enough money. And it makes me feel like people are going to judge me. But I see it at the school, and I will see kids wearing, very low end clothing because they're low socioeconomic, or they're just wearing mismatched clothing or very odd outfits or anything like that. And hardly anybody ever even takes notice of it. They don't focus on the brand names. They don't focus on appearance so much. They're just like, oh, that's how that person wants to dress. Like they're not really even caring about it that much.
That's really indicative of a more supporting environment that's teaching emotional intelligence, and teachers who are really invested in who these young people become. That's really fantastic. And so, we're going to get into this a little bit later, but you grew up in a space where you were ADHD. You have discovered later in life that you're neurodivergent, and you were also having a difficult time in your own. I guess we'll just kind of go there now. And your education when you were growing up. Let's talk about how different that was than what you're doing now.
Yeah. So growing up, mostly it was my mom as a single parent. And from first grade on, I started having parent teacher conferences that were focused on me not doing my work in school.
Right.
So I was academically gifted and highly intelligent, and one of the youngest kids in my school, having a mid-August birthday. I was just there at the cutoff, so I was usually like the youngest or one of the youngest in my class. and not having some of the maturity of the other kids. And for as soon as we started, I started having difficulty doing work outside of home. And we'd have these meetings, and they would say, Jesse, you need to do your homework. And I would say, why? And they would say, well, because you need to practice and learn this stuff, and you need the repetitions. And I would say, do I ace all your tests? The teacher would say yes. And I would say, well, then your point is moot. I don't need to do this practice. Your argument is invalid. You haven't justified why I need to do all this busy work. It's irrelevant to me. And that's how it went for most of the career. Nobody really got through to me and could explain why I needed to do these things, or maybe could explain that maybe it's not just about the academics. Maybe it's also about doing work that you don't want to do, which is a life lesson that was very long coming for me. That was something that I didn't pick up. Like, that was, there's lots of stuff in your adult life that's homework. It's tedious. It's something you don't want to do. And it might not be, the most productive thing or whatever, but you have to get stuff done. So I really struggled with that. I struggled socially, partially because I was young and a little bit immature, but also realizing in my 40s that I was neurodivergent and going back and re-examining my school journey from that lens, and a lot of things clicked into place and made a little bit more sense of why I was having a hard time connecting with my peers. Even from a very young age, I had a lot of hard time connecting with peers because I just wasn't reading the social cues as well and didn't understand. I was an only child for 8 years. So I didn't have a lot of socialization my age. And so I wasn't clued into those things. I wasn't able to form those relationships a lot of times.
So it sounds like the difference between the education that you had and the education that you provide now is that you're doing a lot of teaching that doesn't necessarily have the redundancy and the repetition involved. And of course, some of this stuff you have to repeat in order to get it into your head. There's a purpose in that sort of thing. But my sense of the Waldorf whole thing is that it's not just based on teaching you how to do unnecessary things. It's teaching you how to do a large swath of different kinds of things so that you can really tell yourself as you grow older, I've got a little bit of a background in kind of everything.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of a Renaissance education. I mean, I just got finished directing a play with 28 children. And that, a big part of that is getting them to get those public speaking skills, to get over their nervousness, to get past their ego. You have to say over and over again, louder, louder, louder. You have to project on stage. And there's some kids who really struggle with that, and they're more shy and they have a hard time projecting. But it's a real exercise for them. And I see the growth year after year as we push them to do these out of the box things that they might not do everywhere, especially in middle school, where a lot of this stuff drops off in the public sector. We still do field trips, which are a very big part of our education. I bring the kids improv games on a regular basis. And I know those skills are going to serve them well in the future. We just did an exercise where we did mock job interviews. And I showed them how their improv skills were helping them as I would throw them a question that they were not prepared for. And they were able to think on their feet and adjust. And these are mock scenarios, but they can make them up on the fly. And they've gotten so much better as they've gone and they've grown. And they go through a lot of different aspects and challenges. Some kids really love the art and they excel at that. Some kids, it's a challenge all the way through. Some kids make it all the way to 8th grade and they're still not good artists. They don't feel good about their work, and it's just not clicking for them. And that's part of it. Some kids don't like singing. Some kids don't like doing drama or sports. Everybody's got their own thing, but they're all getting exposed to it, and they're overcoming, and they're figuring out, they're doing growth. Growth comes from getting out of your comfort zone.
Well, I do hope that you are teaching parallelograms and the Pythagorean theorem, because I can't tell you how many times in my adult life I have used those two things. So I wanted to ask you about coming to the realization at a certain point in your life that you might have autism spectrum disorder. It wasn't something that I think that you had total awareness of. When did you start kind of putting the things together, and what was it like for you to finally realize it?
The start of COVID was a big transition period for me. I'm a very extroverted person, and I was teaching at the time. I was in my first full year of teaching, actually, and we got sent home for spring break, and it was like we didn't know what was going to happen, and then we ended up not coming back to campus. And so at that time, I was forced to be more introspective and start taking a look at myself and start re-examining things from a different perspective. And primarily, I'd started working on my physical health and tried to start taking better care of my body, as I was having a lot of the 40-year-old aches and pains and less mobility. And through that process, as I was researching about how I used to sit in the W position as a kid, or how I used to walk on my toes when I was a kid. And I stumbled across, oh, these are symptoms of autism. And I was completely surprised, and I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. So I started looking up more symptoms and realizing, hey, these things sound awfully familiar to me. And you were one of the first people that I reached out to, actually, because I needed somebody who knew me well enough, but that had a professional background, but was also detached, not my wife, and just said, hey, if you had to put me on this spectrum, what do you think? And your instant response was probably a 2 or a 3, but I don't usually tell people because they don't usually take it very well. And it was quite a revelation. I mean, I appreciated your candor. That's why I went to you. I knew that's what I would get from you. But it was a revelation for me to start thinking about that and re-examining my life from that perspective, and my relationships especially, and going back and light bulbs going off of, oh, well, there's a clear reason why some of these things were happening, and that's what it was. And how do I now come to terms with this in my 40s? Like, now I'm kind of rethinking who I am from a different lens, different perspective. I never considered myself ADD, even though I deal with it on a constant basis with children and can recognize it in them. I wasn't really recognizing some of those symptoms in myself, or how those things affected me. Some symptoms, like, I didn't even realize were part of those things. So it was a very eye-opening experience, and it gave me a different perspective, and I think I've made a lot of progress because of it. Being more aware of it and more aware of my tendencies definitely allowed me to focus more on that, and to clean up some of the things that maybe I didn't like how I was behaving, or my personality, and understanding where those things were coming from.
Now, is there anything else that helped you expand your mind and helped you understand more about who you are and helped you understand more about your potential?
Yeah, actually, you were another inspiration. You started talking about doing research for psychedelics at the time, and you were very excited at the potential of these things and how they could be used in therapy modalities. Um, And it was something that I'd never really thought of before. I wasn't really open to that idea, but you had done your homework. You had done, I think you were doing a program at that time where you were educating yourself. And I started doing my own research around it and looking into it. And I decided that I did want to try doing psilocybin mushrooms and see how that worked out. And so I did, started off very low dosage, just trying to do microdose and seeing how that affected me, and noticing that pretty quick response of lessening of anxiety, and somewhat that I didn't really know was present. I do tend to carry a lot of tension in my body, and that causes health issues for me. And I didn't realize how much anxiety I was carrying around until it went away a little bit. And then that was a good perspective for me. And then I gradually increased and experimented with it. And then I went for higher dosage. And had some very powerful introspective journeys where I felt that I could reconnect with myself. And I really started going through a transformation at that point. Um, I would consider myself at that point, I'm a military veteran, and for a long time, I had earned a reputation of not having a lot of empathy. And excuse me. Let me take a drink.
Yeah, go for it. No problem.
I had a reputation of having low empathy, not being a good caretaker if somebody was ill, or not, just not having a lot of empathy for people. So I started re-examining myself and thinking about where that came from and re-examining my life. And I went back to the beginning, and I realized that I was not always like that. I had forgotten, it had been so long, but that I was actually a really sensitive kid. I was
Uh-huh.
raised mostly by women, and I would consider overly sensitive, overly like feminine, imbalanced at that point. And it was causing a lot of difficulty in my life. I was getting bullied in school. I was getting picked on. And it wasn't till I got to middle school and I hit a growth spurt, and I joined the wrestling team, and I learned to be more masculine and stand up for myself, that I started swinging the other way, and realized that the best way to protect myself was to attack the people that were wanting to hurt me. I developed a very acidic sense of humor that I could tear people down with so they would leave me alone. And I stopped showing sensitivity and vulnerability. And it continued. And then I moved with my dad when I went to high school. And that was further reinforced of, you don't need to be so sensitive, you need to be tougher, you need to project this manly tough guy image. And then I went directly from high school into the Navy for 9 years, and of course that culture was all about feeding that. And so I realized that at some point I had just shut off a lot of my feelings and a lot of empathy and all these things that I had inside me that were always present. And the journey was mostly me going into these experiences, and instances would pop up through my life. Memories would come unbidden to me, and I would think, why am I thinking about this right now? I haven't thought about this in 30 years. And then I would reparent myself through the experience and realize how adults in my life had failed me at that time, how I was getting a lot of bad advice, because a lot of what I took at my dad's word was, yeah, he's smart and he knows what he's doing and he takes care of business and he's responsible and I should emulate him more. And so I took a lot of what he said as gospel. and then going back and reparenting and realizing that a lot of that stuff was actually toxic and really unhelpful and unsupportive, and going back and reparenting myself and saying it's okay that you went through these things, it's okay to feel these things, it's okay to, to have made mistakes, to have hard things going on in life, and just being the person that I needed at that time. And that's definitely what I take in to my profession now. That's why I wanted to get into the field, was to be the person that I needed when I was that age. Middle school is one of the toughest ages, and these kids need somebody that's in their corner. Some of them have great parents, and that's wonderful. Some of them don't. Some of them don't have the support they need, and they're struggling and they don't know how to do this. And that's what my goal is, to be there for them and show them, like, I've lived a life of a lot of challenges and difficulty. A lot of that came from my own doing, and there's a better way to do it. I want you to figure it out before you're in your 40s, before you have to go through so many of these hardships and ruin enough relationships to learn how to do this. Wouldn't it be better to learn beforehand how to be emotionally intelligent, and how to take care of yourself and practice good self-care, and have how to build healthy relationships? And so that's my mission now.
Well, I want to reflect back to you on something. Now, you have, as a voice tonality, you have a really strong monotone, and you deliver information at a specific kind of voice tone that changed when you started talking about your experience with psychedelics. There was more of a difference in the way that you spoke about of things. And what you talked about in this is the concept of the neuroplasticity and the ability for psychedelics to open up new ways of thinking, new pathways, new freeways, if you will, that branch onto other on-ramps and other off-ramps, like a tree, like a web, And so it helped connect you to a number of different things. All of a sudden, you're noticing, I didn't realize I was carrying around so much anxiety. And you know what? When I was a kid, I was really sensitive, which is really one of the hallmarks of autism spectrum disorder. One of the things that I work with a lot of people on, that my clientele that has autism spectrum, is the really strong sensitivity that they have to feeling different, to the approach that other people have when they come at them. It's almost like people with autism spectrum disorder are really responding to various different frequencies that come at them. And you needed to be able to defend and protect the fact that deep down you're really pretty sensitive, right? And so a lot of people who are sensitive, they really have to learn to put up their dukes in order to protect themselves, because they know deep down that there is a vulnerability. And honestly, it was a tremendous amount of strength that you were able to develop that was able to protect. But then of course you're out of balance, because you're doing the tough guy role play, while inside of you there is truly this sensitivity that is so lovely, that is so wonderful, that is so creative, and everything. So the psychedelics, it sounds like it was able to help you see the different avenues and the different pieces of you, and help you integrate those things together, and so that you felt more full and more authentic in who it is that you are at your core, and that you can truly be that person without having to put on a front, without having to be overly sensitive, but to also just increase your level of emotional intelligence, particularly as you go into teaching young people really to do that same thing.
Right. I equate it to Pink Floyd's The Wall, the very famous scene at the end where they're tearing down the brick wall that he's built around himself to protect himself from all he's been through, and exposing all the vulnerabilities. And I feel I was definitely unbalanced before, and now I'm very focused on being balanced, balancing the masculine and feminine energies. I think that's crucial for a teacher. Some teachers are far too nice and too empathetic and they can gets out of hand. Like, you have to have both. You have to be able to be stern and forceful and make them do the things that they don't want to do all the time, and have that respect. But you have to have the empathy and the caring and the compassion to balance it out. And that's what I'm always striving for now, is to find that happy spot in the middle where I can be balanced and give the kids what they need.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's an incredibly powerful transformation. Now, what did you notice in yourself about the difference in the way that you related to the closest people around you?
Well, it's kind of been twofold. Um, I think it definitely helped with a lot of my personal relationships, family relationships. It opened my eyes to certain things and helped me just be a better, kinder person and more thoughtful. And conversely, it also changed me to the point where I felt like I was growing a lot, and some of my relationships, it became a degree of, this doesn't work for me anymore. We're not on the same level.
Mm.
You're where I was, and that's why we connected at that time, but we don't connect like that anymore because I have changed so much. I look back at myself even 5 years ago and I think, you are a drastically different person than you were 5 years ago. And I think you would agree.
No, I would definitely agree. And it's been really wonderful to see you begin to like yourself more. See you begin to be more regulated in yourself, more in command of the way that you react to things, more understanding of your words, and more careful about them and stuff. It's been a notable difference. It's been wonderful. Now, I didn't prepare you for this one. A lot of people who use psychedelics, they find themselves growing in a spiritual way. Is there a piece of that changed you or enhanced something for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And very unexpectedly. I have been a agnostic for most of my life. I tried Christianity and going to church, through different relationships that I had in my life. My dad became very religious and Christian, and I tried to be involved in that, and it never really felt right to me. And I was very much a person that was saying, I don't know anything beyond science or what we as a society know as a quote unquote fact or a theory, and that is it. I don't know that there's anything more than that. I don't believe in any of this stuff. And it definitely opened my eyes and opened my mind to some different ideas. I have a much more spiritual outlook now, and not religious, but spiritual. And not that I believe in certain things very strongly, but that I'm much more open to them. I've experimented with things that I wouldn't even be open to before, like acupuncture or Reiki energy work. In the past, I would have said, no, that's not for me. There's no science behind it. So yeah, it's been a big transformation where I've been open to ideas and feeling more that there's more going on than just what's on the surface. And I always approach these things from a skeptical perspective. That's who I am. And I talk to my wife, and she says, "Oh, you're kind of getting into some odd things in there." And I go, "Yeah, I know. It's odd to me too. It's surprising that I'm even interested in any of these things or learning about these things." And I always tell her, I'm very aware of it. I don't want to go off the deep end. I'm not going to start a cult and go out somewhere in the wilderness, and be a Netflix special eventually.
Are you talking about me?
Yes, I said Jeremy's going to do that, um, but yeah, it was. But I always approach it from the perspective of, is this beneficial to me? Is it healthy for me? And the things that I come across, the spiritual practices and the beliefs are very healthy, and they're actually, a lot of them correspond with mental health practices that we know are good for us. And so I just go, if it's good for me and there's no risk, there's no harm, then I'm okay with being open to these things and experimenting with these things and seeing how they feel to me.
Yeah, yeah, it's it's interesting how these wonderful plant-based medicines have the ability to do such huge healing. And there are scholastic research papers being written about autism spectrum disorder and the use of psychedelics, and that research is just going at light speed right now. And it's showing a lot of what it is that you are talking about, the ability for somebody like you to make new and enriching connections that, look, we all do this. We get into a certain form of thinking. We start carving the same pattern over and over again. We do it in several different ways. We listen to the same music all the time. We take in the same media all the time. We drive the same way to work. And it can really turn into, I'm talking about more commonplace things, but particularly with someone who has autism spectrum disorder, there is a real strong procedure to everything, and a divergence from that procedure can sometimes be a little bit destabilizing. So the ability to put together more pieces, access more parts of yourself, that's what they're finding, is really the incredible the incredible research and promise using psychedelics with autism spectrum disorder in, with a guide that understands what they're doing.
Right. I read articles and scientific journals all the time about how they're doing these studies and how effective they are. You know, a lot of veterans with PTSD having great results with these things. I think, essentially to me, what it boils down to is it does get you out of those ruts that you get stuck in, and it forces you to deal with the things that you are not dealing with. I think that the body keeps the score is one theory that I definitely believe in. I think that whatever we experience, we have to experience it. And a lot of times it's so hard, and we don't know how to experience it in a healthy way, that a lot of us just shove everything down and hold on to it in our bodies, hold on to it in our minds, and it holds us down. And then the plant medicine can kind of break it down a little bit and force you to re-examine things that you kind of forgotten about, that you've been pushing down for so long, and go, oh, I have some work to do. I need to feel these things. It wasn't it's not usually a super pleasant experience for me, especially at the beginning. There were sessions of absolute just uncontrollable sobbing as I'm doing yoga on the floor, and things would come up, and all of a sudden I would just be overwhelmed, and I would think, I never get to this point because I'm usually so worried about what other people will think about me. Even my wife, who is a therapist and will have no judgment and will be 100% supportive, I don't really want to break down in front of her. It's ingrained in me to hide those things.
Yes.
And so it's very cathartic. Like, I look at it as I go into these sessions, I look at it as a therapy session. It's not particularly pleasant. I wonder, what am I going to deal with this time? What is going to come up for me this time? And then, but I feel capable of handling it at this point. I feel capable of being detached and being that parental figure in the situation, and looking at it from a mature perspective and saying, oh, you went through this and the adults in your life were not supportive. And how long have you been holding on to this? and re-examining these things and healing from it. That's what it's been. Like, I've been working hard to heal from these things. They're still in my life, they're still in my memory, but I've made peace with them. I've forgiven people involved. I've forgiven myself for a lot of things and given myself the kindness and compassion that I've been withholding for a long time. I was doing therapy at the same time, and one of the big things I got from that was she asked me how I talk to myself. And I told her, well, I look at myself in the mirror and I say, okay, Watkins, time to get your shit together and get the job done and stop crying and stop whining and just do what you need to do. And she said, oh, is that how you talk to your students or your players as you're coaching? And I was like, no, obviously I would get fired if I did that, for one thing, and that's not a healthy way to do it. And she said, well, why do you do it to yourself? Whose voice is that? And I'd never thought about it before. And I thought, well, it's my coaches from sports, it's military supervisors, it's my father, it's a lot of men, or, construction. I worked construction for 10 years, and that was a very toxic, male toxic environment. And I realized that I had taken on that persona and I was doing that to myself. And then when I saw my therapist again, they said, how's it going? I said, I've stopped. Like, I've never done that again. And she was like, you just stopped cold turkey? And I'm like, well, I'm a very logical person. That's part of being on the spectrum. When you pointed out how ridiculous that was, that I was doing that to myself, I'd never thought about it. And then it was like, oh, light bulb went off. And you're right. I do like myself now. I like myself worlds more than I've ever liked myself. I'm so much more proud of myself. I'm allowed to do that, and I'm not hard on myself when I'm having a hard time and I'm struggling with things or I'm feeling really down. I'm more compassionate and I'm going, it's okay. You're going to get through this. It's a tough time. You're doing your best. I'm my own cheering section, and it's made a world of difference.
This is a huge change for you. This is why I wanted to have you on Mindful Mutiny, because you went from which was a lot of labor with your hands in a construction environment. I remember the work trucks. I remember all of that sort of thing. And you've made such an enormous change in your life to do something really, really different than you probably ever thought that you were going to do before. But you started to awaken to your actual potential and your actual desires, and the way that you wanted to spend the rest of your career in making an enriching difference with young people. And so now you've had not just that you made a values-based decision about what you wished to pursue, but also that you have awakened in yourself these pieces of you that were not developed, that you didn't have real awareness of. And all of a sudden, this wonderful sensitivity, this wonderful reasoned mind with this spiritual mind and this empathy, where you're able to put all of this together in order to provide empathy from the front of a classroom for young people who are also going through their own incredibly difficult journey of being young people, learning about themselves, making mistakes, not understanding who they are. And they have many, many years left before they come to a place where they each truly understand themselves. But you're planting seeds, and you're doing this based upon this newly found sense of self that you have, and this development that you've done of yourself. And so I guess, like, for you, now that you are in this stride in your life, what are the most important things that you want to impart in the young people that you work with?
I think actually I'm focused on developing some curriculum. I would like to get some more focused curriculum on DBT. and educating children on emotional intelligence from a very early age, because I think that's one of the most important things. I mean, their mental health is the primary concern all the time. Like I said, education becomes so much easier when they're doing well. But I thought, looking back at our education and the things we learned, and you had to become a therapist to learn this stuff. I had to marry a therapist to learn a lot of this stuff. And thinking, if there had been somebody early on who was teaching me this stuff more explicitly in a way that I could digest and understand, I would have been so much further ahead of the game than I am now. I didn't start teaching until I was in my late 30s. I think about going back and doing that when I was 24 or 26, as some of my colleagues are, and I think there's no way I could have done that. I couldn't have handled it. I would have not had the empathy and everything that I needed, all the tools that I needed. So it's a big deal. And so we're working on building a curriculum where students get more understanding of their emotions. They get better emotional intelligence. They get tools on how to cope with life's challenges. Like, life's going to have challenges at some point. Everybody's going to go through things, and having the tools that, everybody's always asking me, like, do you know a therapist? Do you know a therapist for my child? I get asked that so many times from parents who aren't even in my class, because they know my wife is a therapist, and will she do that? No, she doesn't work with kids. I don't know anybody. There's so many parents looking for therapy for their kids. And a lot of what therapy is going to do is educate them. I mean, therapists are basically educators. They listen, they examine, they educate, they get people to look at things from different perspectives and understand themselves better, and where these things are coming from, where secondary emotions come from, what causes these things, and how to better regulate them. And so I want kids to be in a better place with that. I want them to be further along than me. I want them to understand. I want them to even see the things that are going on with their parents. I want them to examine their parents and say, maybe my parent doesn't handle these situations in a very healthy way. I don't want to repeat those patterns. Or looking at their parents and saying, look, my parents do these things very well, and they take care of themselves, and they're in a healthy way, and they're successful. And I do want to emulate these things. That's why it's happening. It's not accidental. It's not luck of the draw. People take care of themselves. People do what they need to be doing, and they're emotionally intelligent. They tend to be more successful. They tend to be happier. They have better relationships. And that's what life is about.
What do you see as the major changes that really should be made with the modern educational system, and how things could be made to give young people a more useful education?
That's a good question. I think about this very often. I think that we are on the precipice of a major shakeup in education. I think COVID woke a lot of people up to what is happening in the education system and what they're willing to put up with. People are leaving the teaching profession in droves. People are not entering the teaching profession as much as they were. I mean, teachers are not equipped for success. I mean, I took a $20,000 pay cut to become a teacher and had to jump through many, many what I call flaming hoops to get there. It was an extremely arduous journey just to get a teaching credential and get there, to take a massive pay cut, and to do what's, quite frankly, the hardest job I've ever had. I often fantasize about going back to my easy life on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf so that I could take a break and relax a little bit. So I think that things are kind of on the brink of collapse. as we see people that aren't even qualified being brought in to be in educational roles across the country. You can't hire enough teachers. Classroom sizes are way too big. And we're not supporting these kids in the way that we should. And also, it's a much different era. Kids have information at their fingertips so much more readily, and we have AI coming out. And I think that's going to change education drastically. I've already had instances of kids experimenting, trying to use it to write papers for them. And I've used it extensively in my work too. I'm not afraid of technology, and I'll use it to. I have so much work for prepping and building lesson plans, and yeah, I could read 5 books on World War II to bone up on this stuff, but I don't have the time and energy. But I can use a Chat GPT to go in and say, give me some topics that I need to teach on, and then go research those things specifically, and I use it as a tool to help me build stuff and help lessen the work. And I think that that's what a lot of these kids are going to be doing. They're going to have so much information at their fingertips and so many resources. A lot of what they need to be taught is how to utilize those resources in an effective and healthy and safe way, and how not to become reliant on those things as well. Because if something goes down and that's not available to them, or they're in a situation where they don't have that, they need to be able to fend for themselves as well. We can't become too reliant on it. But I think we have to re-examine the whole thing. We have, of course, standardized testing has been a long time debate amongst people, and I don't believe in it at all. I don't believe it shows anything much more than socioeconomic status. I just read an article on that the other day. And even grades, I think that grades need to be rethought. My students get so focused on grades that they're not really focused on education. They're not focused on why we're doing this. It's just grades. Will their parents be upset? Will this affect my high school classes? Then I'm going to high school, and then I have to get the grades to make college because everything's so competitive. And they're not learning to learn, a lot of them. They're not getting the enjoyment of it. They're stressed. I see a lot of students have massive test anxiety and stress and anxiety over work because they're just so worried about what's going to happen. And it takes a lot of the joy out of education. And as they're going to get access and be able to do a lot of these things without teachers, when they can learn, I mean, you can learn basically anything if you have a mind to do it. Things are not closed off. You can take classes at MIT online for free with no prerequisites. You can take Harvard classes. The information's all out there. So what do we need to do? We need to learn to be humans. We need to learn to be good humans and handle life and handle these things responsibly and not let it take over our lives. Not be sitting there with a VR headset on 12 hours a day or driving our Tesla around with an Apple headset on your head. And how to have interactions and how to build relationships and how to handle these things and how to overcome challenges and find the information that you need and have a love of learning and be able to be exposed to art and drama and singing and all these things. That's I think what our emphasis should be more about, and sports and physical health and learning about how to take care of yourself. Like, the human body and the human mind are extremely complicated, and we don't know just a fraction of these things. Most people don't even know how to maintain their own body. Like, I'm constantly learning new things about how to take care of myself and take care of my physical health better and my mental health. And I think that's what's really important.
It truly is. And, you know, with regard to standardized testing, I'm really glad that I took so many standardized tests, because it really prepared me for the working world, where every 2 weeks we take a standardized test to measure our productivity. And so that model really is relevant for what young people need to know as they go into their adult life.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I'm very forthcoming with my students. I like to be as transparent as I possibly can, and they ask me a lot, why are we learning this? And I always tell them, like, yes, that's the question you should always be asking. Question everything. Why are we learning this? And sometimes, I'll tell them when we're doing math, and the math that they're expecting them to do in middle school is not the math that we were doing in middle school. This is high level high school math that they're doing a lot of times before they're ready. And we're going through these obscure lessons, and they're asking me, when am I going to use this? Have you ever used this in your life? And sometimes I can say, the Pythagorean theorem, yes, I have used this in the real world. I dazzled construction guys with my magic and learned how to measure a distance without actually measuring a giant distance. And they were like, he's a wizard. But have I ever used a scatter plot graph in my life? No, that's not been useful in my life ever. But, and I tell them some of it is learning how to do things that you don't want to do. Like, there's a lot of stuff in life that you're not going to want to do. We still get homework in our jobs. Our homework a lot of times is email or figuring out problems or learning a new system. There's training all the time. And when we have to do workplace trainings, and we've all clicked through all those videos, and there's a lot of stuff. And so that sometimes that's the lesson. Or if we're doing history, then it's, well, yeah, why are we learning this? What are the lessons? What are we looking at? As we're sitting here on the precipice of World War III, and we're studying World War I and World War II, I am asking them, what needs to change? And I tell them all the time, like, I'm here because this is how I can have the most impact on society in a positive way and for the future, because I am planting these seeds with you, and I want you to see that you are the future. You are the ones that are going to make these changes happen. You're the ones that are going to have to stand up and say, the status quo is not working. We've been asleep for a long time in this industrial, capitalistic world. And a lot of people are waking up and realizing that these conditions we've been put into, we've been conditioned to accept these things as normal and to take pride in working our 14-hour days, and or never taking a sick day. I've had so many men say, I've never taken a sick day. That's not something to be proud of. Stay home when you're sick and recuperate and take care of yourself. We've got to undo these toxic mentalities we've had. And so they're examining history, and they're saying, and I ask them, what are the failings of humanity? What did we do wrong? Why were these things happening? What needs to change so that we can get better and stop having repeats of this awful stuff? And so we're always talking about critical thinking. How do we need to do these things? What are the lessons that we need to learn? I'm all about life lessons. Everything that I'm doing is a life lesson. What do you need to learn to make your life better, the lives of everybody else better? How do we make a better future? Because what we're doing right now is not working, and I'm pretty fed up with it.
What would you tell adults about the experience of their spectrum children? What should they look out for? What should they keep in their hearts as they are trying to help a young person navigate a very complicated world?
I think first I would tell them to be open to it. I know a lot of parents are very resistant to getting labels put on their children, especially anything that makes their children different. And so a lot of them are turning a blind eye to signs that are there that a lot of other people see. And a lot of them are in denial, and they think that their kid will just grow out of something, or it's a phase, or there's nothing wrong because that's how they were when they were a kid. I've definitely heard that one, like, oh, that's how I was as a kid. Well, that doesn't make it right. Like, you need to be, because you also were not aware of these things. So I think first and foremost is be willing to look at your kid from an outside perspective, from as unbiased a perspective as you can, and be accepting of who they are and listen to feedback from other people that are in their lives. And then from that point, educate yourself. I mean, that's the most important thing. Is there's a lot of parents who are looking for education because they weren't taught how to deal with these things. When I grew up, the word autism was not in my vocabulary, and I didn't hear it. I didn't hear it for many, many years. So nobody knew how to deal with it. We just labeled those kids as troubled kids or problem kids, and they'd send them outside the classroom for hours at a time, or just, discipline, just try and discipline it out of them. But the more you understand them and understand what their perspective is and what life is like for them, then you're better able to help them and guide them and help them be more aware of themselves and how to deal with their challenges and how to get better and how to accept that within themselves, how to deal with it in a more effective way.
Thank you so much for coming on Mindful Mutiny and talking about your life and your experience and everything. It's been really a rich conversation. I appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here. It was my pleasure. I'm confident this will be the highest rated episode.
Oh, it absolutely will. It absolutely will. No, now please don't forget to like and subscribe to the Mindful Mutiny Podcast. It really helps with growing the Mindful Mutiny Podcast. And in a lifetime, there are more decisions than anybody can count. Living the highest form of yourself is the most rewarding thing that you can do. Make incredible, positive, risky, and bold decisions to be the highest version of you. Now go be something great.